Hello, it's the beginning of May, and as you can see, the sun is shining beautifully. So hopefully, fingers crossed, this is the start of spring finally deciding to actually be here. The greenhouses are very, very full. There's a little bit I'm going to sow in May. So I'm going to show you how I'm going to sow my beans. Whatever beans you're doing, whether it's climbing French, whether it's dwarf French, whether it's runner beans, climbing, or even the dwarf ones, you need to sow them in exactly the same way. This is how I sow mine, and I always sow them at the beginning of May, because after years and years of figuring out how long it takes for them to grow, this is the perfect time. You want to sow them between 3 and 4 weeks before you plant them outside, because if you do that, then they'll be between 6 and 9 inches tall when you put them outside, which means that they're nice and they're a good size and they'll actually survive. If they're too small, then they tend to sort of struggle a little bit. If they get too tall, then they'll actually intertwine with each other and it's an absolute nightmare. So sow your bean seeds 3 to 4 weeks before you're going to plant them outside. Because I'm in the south of the UK, we've only got, once we get to the beginning of June, we have no worries of frost. So that's why I do mine at the beginning of May. If you live slightly further up north, you know your climate better than me. So I would suggest leaving yours sort of another week. If you live sort of way up in Scotland, maybe leave it another 2 to 3 weeks. Okay, so I'm going to show you how to do that. There's a few little bits that need to prick out, and there's some things that I've been planting out in the garden already. So let's start with the beans. Here I've got one of these. I bought these. They're absolutely brilliant. They're really sturdy. They do cost a little bit, but it's something that I can use year after year. There are 40 compartments in here, which is great for when you're sowing your beans. So what I've done is I've just filled them with multi-purpose compost. Just shake it down and just sort of fill the holes like this. Once you've filled all of them, what I would suggest you do is then just using 2 fingers, just gently push down, and that way you can start to sort of compress the compost. Don't do it too firmly, because you've got to push your beans in, and if it's too firm, then you won't be able to do that. So once you've pushed all of them down, you can see lots of little divots. So you then need to get a little bit more compost, just put it over the top like that. You don't have to be very picky with it. If you just sort of rub it in like that, and then it will fill up the holes, and then that should be absolutely fine. Now, the variety of beans that I've got here, these are called Blue Lake. They do really, really well. But whatever variety of French beans or runner beans you have, do them exactly the same way. So French beans tend to be a little bit smaller than runner beans, but don't worry about that. So what I tend to do is I sow 2 in each little compartment, and I will put them on top of the soil to start with, because if you get distracted, then you'll forget where you've got to. So I'll just do those few just to show you. So once I've laid all of my seeds on top, all I will do is I will just put my finger on the seed, and I will just push it down to about this first knuckle here, which is the one just above where your nail is. So just push them down. Because the compost, you haven't compacted it too much, these should go down really easily. Now when I do come to plant these outside, if both of these come up together, I will not separate them. I will keep them together, and they will grow perfectly happily together. So once you've pushed your seeds down, you just need a little bit more compost just to pop over the top, so that you can fill in those holes. Once you've done all of those and I've filled up the tray, what I will do is I will label it and then I will water it, and make sure that you water it with water straight from the tap. Once they have germinated and they're outside in the ground, then you can use butt water, but just to start with you need to use water from the tap. Here I've got my rocket and I've also got some chard here, and I'm going to prick those out now. So I've got one of my little square pots, just filled it with multi-purpose compost. Now both of these I will prick out in exactly the same way. I'm not going to do them individually because that's just completely insane and I would be here forever and a day. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to prick them out into sort of little groups of anywhere between 3 and 6. It depends how they come out. So I've got 2 there. I use my little safety knife, which I find works absolutely brilliantly. Oh, look, and there's another couple that have come in there. Okay, so these are my little rocket seedlings. So I'm just going to cuddle those together, and then I'll make a hole in the compost in the pot, and I will just push them in. Okay, make sure that you push them in so that they're a little further down than they were in the compost there, and that will just make the plants a little bit more sturdy and robust. So I will carry on doing the rocket like this. I will do the chard in exactly the same way, and once I have finished all of these, now these plants are sort of getting established, they can have water from the water butt, so I will water them briefly from the top, and that will help sort of level off any of the compost, and then I will stick a load of water in the tray so that the compost from the bottom can soak up the water. So they will stay in the greenhouse for most probably about another 2 weeks possibly, and then I will be planting them outside. The rosemary here is doing really well. I tend to find that if it's a little bit too small, it's a bit too small to prick out, but these ones here have now got big enough. So what I'm going to do is very carefully I'll put the blade of my knife at a 45-degree angle and just push it in and gently encourage one of the rosemary seedlings out. There it comes. Okay, take hold of it by its leaf, and I don't know whether you can see, you've got a lovely little root system in there. Can you see that? They're very small. So what I'm going to do with that is I've got another square pot here, so I am going to make a little hole in there. I will pop the rosemary in there as well, and I will just level it off. What I have done with this is I've put it roughly the depth it was in this compost here. So I will carry on and do all of those, but you must do those individually. I've got some parsley here, and just like the rocket and the chard, I will do these in little groups. At the back here, let me just turn this round, I have got some celery. Now I have still got celery in the garden from last year. It did really well. I was well chuffed. So these again you have to do individually. So just get your knife underneath. There's a little bit of grass there. We don't want that, do we? So take hold of the little seedling by its leaf, and we've got a lovely root system under there. So again, we will put that in the small pot, just like that. And again, at the level it was in its compost here. Now I've got my peas in here, and I've got small bamboo canes that I've used here. If you've got some twigs, they will work absolutely fine. You can put them in a sort of a long structure. If you want, you can put them in a wigwam, whatever works well for you. Excuse me. But what I've done here is I've just sort of put the sticks higgledy-piggledy, and I've just attached them to the top using some cable ties. So I've got all of my peas apart from one in, and we've got 4 growing in this pot. I'm not going to separate them. So what I'm going to do is I've got a stick here, and I'm just going to dig a nice hole here, turn the pot upside down, give the pot a bit of a squeeze, and you can see all the lovely roots down here. They really are fabulous. So I'm going to put this in the hole that I've just dug, and I will lean them against the bamboo cane. So that way, when all their little tendrils start to grow, they'll actually grab hold of one of the sticks. It doesn't have to be the stick that they're planted against. They will grab hold of one. You might have to sort of encourage them a little bit with a little bit of string. See how they get on, just to sort of say, this is what you've got to do. So I will plant it in here, push it down, backfill that hole with a little bit more soil, and I've planted these a little bit lower than they were in the pot. So I will give these a water, excuse me, with water straight from the water butt, and they will be absolutely fine. So as the weeks go on, they will gradually climb up, and then hopefully very soon we will get some flowers, and then I'll be harvesting the first of the peas. I've got some of my lettuce in, but I've just got one more plant to get in to show you. I've planted them really quite close together, and the reason for that is because I'm not going to wait for them to be completely finished. I will pick the leaves as and when I need them. You may well remember that when I did prick them out, when they were little tiny seedlings, I did them in little clumps. So this is why I plant them very close together. If you want to have individual lettuces that you harvest the whole thing, then you're going to need to plant them between 6 and 9 inches apart from each other. But that's not how I roll. I don't do it like this. So I've got the last one to put in, and there's a lovely mixture in here. So I'm just going to dig a nice hole, and the hole needs to be a little bit deeper than the pot. So I will turn it upside down, squeeze it out eventually. Come on, there we go. Ooh. And what I will do is I will put it into the hole and just backfill the hole with the soil that I took out. I will then give these a really good water so that they're nice and established, and they should be very, very happy there. And very soon I will be picking, in fact, the one here, I don't know whether you can see that one, that I could pick that one now if I wanted to, but I'm just going to leave them just to go a little bit bigger. If you do find that any of them start to go to seed, so they sort of grow up and you get a little flower on top, just nip that off as low as you can, and then that will stop that one going to seed, because once they start to go to seed they get a little bit bitter. So nip that off, and then the rest of them will grow. But if you can see, I don't know whether Kai can pan across here, I've got 2 rows of carrots, one there and one there, and 1 row of spring onions, which are there. So they are all growing. There's the spring onions, there's a row of carrots, and there's another row of carrots. And in the last couple of weeks, they've actually just started to come up. The broad beans have been growing really well. They've been in the soil for a good 6 to 8 weeks, possibly. And they've just started to show their little flowers. Now, this is the point where you really need to keep an eye on them, because as soon as the flowers start to come up, you'll get the nice sweet bits from, leaves on the top, and that's what the black fly and the green fly will like. So do keep an eye on those. You may well have to nip out the growing tip if you see some black fly or green fly on them, but don't do it too early, otherwise you won't get the flowers. But they are really settled. I might have to sort of just attach some of the taller ones in just to make them a little bit firmer. But the beetroot are also germinating, which is fabulous to see. So let me just come around here and show you those. If you look very carefully, you can see that they're germinating in here. So they are definitely on their way. And the last thing that I'm going to plant today is some chard. Now at the back here, this is the chard that I planted last year, which sort of dies down a little bit in the winter and then it's just bloomed. It's just amazing. The chickens love it, so that's a good thing. But I've just got some that I sowed this year that I want to plant out. So I'm just going to dig a little hole here. It's right at the base of my grape here, which has also just started to, you can see the first few leaves. So I've dug a hole and I'll squeeze it out of its pot and I will pop it in the pot and just backfill the plant with the soil. Now I did put a load of manure on here as well, Mr. Muck, he's wonderful. So hopefully they clearly seem to be quite happy. So I will give these a good old water in and then hopefully I'll have lots and lots of chard. Chard is really lovely. It's quite underrated. If you can sort of, it's nice sort of sauteed or stir fried and it doesn't really take that long to cook, a couple of minutes, you know, and a little bit of garlic and onions, and it's just fab. So it's quite nice to have quite a lot of it. But there's one more thing I want to show you. This is my rhubarb. I don't force my rhubarb. I know lots of people who do. I have never forced my rhubarb. Forcing rhubarb basically is you put an upturned old metal bin or a plastic pot or a terracotta pot on top of the crown and it seems to come up earlier. I never do that. To be honest with you, can't be bothered really. And my rhubarb is quite spread out, so I would need an awful lot of pots to do that. But my rhubarb is growing beautifully. It's not quite ready to harvest yet, but it won't be long. But if you can see this one here, this is a seed head. Now, if you want to save seeds, you need to let that one grow. It will get quite tall, and then you can save the seeds from it. And then you can sow the seeds and then you can get lots more plants. But we only really need a certain amount of rhubarb. So what I tend to do is I tend to cut the seed head off. Now, if you think of rhubarb, the stem is solid, it's very compact, whereas the stem from the seed head is hollow. So what you need to do is you need to get a decent pair of secateurs, and you need to follow that seed head stem all the way down to the base as far as you can, and then just cut it off. Now it should come off very easily because it's hollow. Can you see the hole in the middle there? Now you can eat any sort of leaves with any stems. You can eat those bits, but as I say, it's not quite ready yet, so I'm not going to eat that. And to be honest with you, 2 stems, considering as how much I will end up getting, I can put those in the compost. So yes, I'll just get rid of that. You won't just get 1 seed head, you could get 2 or 3, you might even get more. So if you see any come up, then just cut them straight off. Well, that's it for May. There will be, as I go through May, sort of in about the middle of May, I will start to put the brassicas out, but I will say, it depending on the weather, If by the middle of May the temperature looks sort of warm enough and we're not due any really cold nights, then I may well start to put some out, but otherwise I may well leave it until nearer the end, and therefore I will put that one in next month's update. Well, I hope you found what I've shown you useful, and if you've got any questions on any of the other videos, do let me know and I'll answer them as quickly as I can. Thank you very much, and I will see you soon. Bye bye.